So one little note to the social externalization. I mentioned Silicon Valley as one of the rich regions. And I read recently in a book the social dimension of it. In terms of, it seems to be very posh. People actually don't show off that they are rich. It seems to be very equal. And then there is this interview, somebody saying, yes, the reason is simply that there are certain people who are actually working here. They are not considered to be part of us. Those who are cleaning here, we don't consider them as being one of us. So we are all rich. Because the others who are not rich, who cannot compete, they don't exist for us. And I think he added something, you may think it's sad, and I wouldn't contest this, but this is the fact. I'll try to find it again and may put it on the internet. But this is something where it is or should be clear in terms of substance, in terms of time, in terms of space, and in social terms. Externalization, as I said, leave it. Leave it, she is here already. She wants to disturb all of this. Externalization, cost or benefit for a party that did not incur that cost. You cause a cost, you are responsible for a cost, but you are not paying yourself. You get somebody else to pay for it. That's the simple definition of externalization. Cost or benefit for a party that did not incur that cost or that benefit. Now you can use taxation actually, and it is used, to kind of counterbalance, to work against it, to say, I make you responsible for it. If you are responsible for the cost, at least you have to pay. You have to pay the price. This means using taxes as a political economic instrument to make those responsible who are responsible. If you export your rubbish, your waste, then you have to pay a certain fee for it, a certain tax, to the Irish, to the Indian state, because you export it there. You expect them to pay, and you kind of repay in advance. What they have to pay. Or you do it nationally, that you say, if you produce, and this is a typical example, if you produce something, it's fine. There is a certain part of it, of waste as well, that is immediate part of this entire process. But then, if you use extensive packaging, if you have the bottle, you have the information on it, you have another label on it, and you have some wrapping around it, and then you put it in a box, and then you put it in an additional box, and so on and so on. And then you have a huge box with just one bottle in it. It's okay, part of the cost of production, what is needed, but all this huge rubbish around it, you have to pay in addition to it. And we don't allow you, this is a very difficult thing, we don't allow you to pass this cost on to others. Not to the customer. It's of course very difficult to regulate it in this way, and this means as well that this kind of taxation, for instance, or any other regulation, is only possible under certain conditions or even in limited ways. Now you can say, I control all these things. I make sure that you don't pass on this cost to the customer. This may mean that the cost of regulation, the cost of implementation, the cost of control are so high that I have to decide there is no point in doing it. What we get, the benefit we get out of this regulation, the benefit that we get out of the taxation in terms of repaying these costs are too high. So when external costs are known, this is the one condition. We have to know exactly what are the external costs, how much is not necessary, what part is externalized, what part is shifted, pushed to somebody else to pay. This is a condition for being able, for allowing us to regulate, or to use whichever way of controlling this externalization. The other thing is that we have to know exactly how much it is in terms of how much is added, because you don't have this one-to-one thing. I do this and this is the consequence. But you have various costs adding together, aggregate. And then these costs have to be large enough. You wouldn't do it for a tiny, tiny amount that is externalized. You wouldn't invest a huge amount of effort of regulation. All this costs money as well. Transaction costs, cost of regulation. So you are dealing again on the borderline, as always, between politics and simple economic calculations. It is as well a matter of risk-taking by the company. To which extent are you ready? Are you prepared to take a risk doing something of which you actually know it is not right? And I say right, I was hesitating, I was thinking about it. What does right mean? Launch ethics. Of course, you have the simple case, it's not legal. Then you know I take the risk not observing the law. I may be fined, calculation, how high is the fine, or I may end up in prison. How many years, how many days, how many whatsoever do I want to spend my time in prison? Simple calculations. And some people sometimes take huge risks. As you know, just open the paper and you'll see it there. And it is, of course, this thing of, I know it's not really the best thing to do, but at the same time, what happens if I don't do it? I'm going out of business. This means it has negative consequences on the other, at some other point. It may mean as well that you think, well, it's the next generation. And then you look at your daughter, at your children, and say, this is the next generation. It's not something I'm not concerned with. Or you may say, well, actually I have to go now to find a green space for holidays instead of going just across the road, there's a park. Very simple things in many cases. And then we can say, of course, looking at another means of controlling, to use tradable permits. I allow you to trade. I allow you to trade certain things with a negative external effect, but not everything. For instance, we have a major concern there when it comes to nuclear waste. We have now the concern with CO2 emissions, which is a very strange thing. You can trade, actually, CO2 emission. How much am I allowed? It's literally, if you translate CO2 emissions, is you trade how much or to which extent am I allowed to do something that is obviously negative for the environment. It's very complicated how this trade works. But I can buy actually something in terms of I'm allowed more emission. I'm allowed to do something more negative than others. Now, the very strict way would say we don't allow trading CO2 emissions. We just stop it. You cannot buy it. If you are over a certain limit, you will be fined. And there is no other way. Just reduce it, keep it up to this level, and don't go to somebody else and say, but you don't have the same emission and I can buy it from you. I can buy off you. Real processes. Sometimes funny processes. Sometimes funny, I say because I was talking to a farmer at some stage, and in the European Union, you have, or you have had at least, trade in milk quotas. So how many farmers had been limited in terms of their production of milk? You got a quota. How many cattle can you keep and how much milk can you bring to the market? And Now the regulation said, and this is why I thought it's really funny, how you deal with it. The regulation said you have a quota of 100 people, you of 150, and you of 120. Now you have the quota of 150, but actually you only produce 110. You would be able to produce more, but you are not allowed due to the quota. But the regulation said actually what is counted is the milk that you milk on your own farm. So what you do, you go with your cattle to her, get your milk out of the cow, milk the cow, and then it's counted on her quota and not on yours, so you're fine. So you give her a little bit money, you earn more than you would lose, definitely by not using the quota to the full extent that you can have. In this way, it is again how many people do you actually send around to make sure that you don't go with your cattle to your neighbor's farm. But it is a means, definitely, of tradable permits, limit by law something that is tradable in principle, limit the tradability if you consider the cost, the externalization is so high that it is worthwhile to do it. Use trade permits do not allow trading certain goods where the negative side effects are too large. Again, the same story. You have to calculate, you have to look into this issue of, is it worthwhile to do it? What is the risk as well on the other side? What is the cost of using trade permits or the limitation? And what is the cost of taking the risk of going beyond this rule? These are very important conditions for every enterprise that are included then in the calculation of prices. There you can see already the difficulty when it comes to a simple orientation on the market regulates the price. On the one hand, it is a confirmation. Yes, the market regulates the price, because if I have to pay for it, I get less for it and on the market, or I increase the price of the goods I produce. But what actually is increased is the price of production. It's not my price that I negotiate on the market. Then you have, of course, this problem on the market. You have to renegotiate there and to say, due to this and that legal change, due to taxation, I have to increase the price now for this product. And then the question comes, on the one hand, what is happening on the demand side? Will it simply accept this new price? Or will it refuse doing so? Which means then I cannot sell anymore the goods to this price, the commodities. So far I have both sides going hand in hand. I have the market, the dimension of supply and demand, but it is linked to the question of the production of commodities, the cost of production. Just a reminder on this, when we talked about production, we talked as well about this general rule or the general definition of cost of production by the factors of production. The productive factors are decisive, and they are defining, actually, in one way or another, how I can define the cost of production, and with this the price, what justifies the price. Again, you have the long chains, but at the very core, you have land, including the raw material, meaning it's not just this site, the soil you have, but it is as well possibly the gold you find if you dig a little bit. It is the water, it is the oil, it is the copper, it is whatever you gain from what we call land as productive factor. And it is labor. And I mention it in this sequence because then, if you have the land, if you have valuable land, you still have to dig the stuff out. The land as such doesn't create value. Same story. You have to do something with it. Even if the value or the valuable stuff is in the land, you have to get it out there. Labor. Then, of course, capital in the widest sense as the third productive factor, factor of production. Literally simplified, digging things out with my own hand is pretty awesome. Having at least a shovel helps. Having 3 people doing it for me helps as well. And then having a huge machine where one person actually can do the work with this machine that usually 20 people would do. It's again another advantage. Land, including raw material, labor, and capital as the factors of production, traditionally. Now the question around it is that of ownership. And there's another more fundamental question. And in a way it is linked to externalization, that land and labor are fictitious commodities. Fictional commodities. As fictional commodities, they are not really commodities in the true sense. They are not reproducible endless, without end. But they are at the same time, what I said is a habitat. It's the space where we live on land. And it is human life. Labor is people who are living, who are working, and as living beings, they are doing it, not as commodity. A tractor is a thing. A spinning mill is a thing. You can produce one, you can produce hundreds. They don't live. Let's assume so. But a worker, you cannot produce them endlessly, and you are not producing them as worker, but as human beings. In this way, it is actually externalization as well, that you say, I utilize the life, this habitat, for my production. I see it there, I locate it out there as a secondary thing, as a commodity, labor, not work, producing exchange value, not use value, producing for me and not for reproduction. This is kind of externalization as well. So in terms of Polanyi, it's fictional commodities. And capital is this thing that we use as machine, as tool, as building, meaning as well capital is not money. We cannot use money to produce anything. We can buy with money the means of production. This means that we have two issues, two economic issues here. The one is the separation between ownership and utilization. You own the machine and I use it. I cannot control the ownership, but I can use it. Sometimes that person who owns or that company owning this cannot use it, not least because a company cannot use it anyway. A company is an institution, not an individual. This is a matter of ownership. And the other dimension is that there is still something that has to bring things together. Meaning capital has to be combined with labor and with land. This is why we say in economics there is a kind of productive factor or factor of production, that's entrepreneurship. The person, and this is why I say kind of, the person who owns capital but utilizes it in this way of bringing these three other or the three factors together, bringing capital together with labor and land. This is again this thing of production. What is the price of production? Where is actually value created? Going to get again one step back. Of course, it is this act of combining. Of course, the market plays a role in terms of determining the factors of production, of setting a price for a machine, for the products I can produce with it, for the land. But at the same time, you come back to this point of generating value, adding something new, is not coming from the combination as such. If I put the different things into one place, establish the building, erect the building, put the machine into it, and employ the workers, nothing happens as such. It only happens if the worker is actively using whatever is there in terms of machines. The building, as I said, capital invested in buildings, in machines, then you say this machine, this building is so and so expensive. That's the price of it. Negotiated on the market. It boils down to how much work, how much labor is used, is needed to erect the building, to build the machine. And this means at the end of the day how much time, this is the abstract labor, how much time is used and goes into this commodity. This is the decisive thing. This is the core of the entire process. It's nothing else, because there even you have the different valuation of time due to what goes into it. In very simple terms, a simple life is not as expensive, as valuable, as an elaborated life. An elaborated life is not just enjoying more things, enjoying different things, but it is as well getting better education, which takes time. Get better equipment that allows you to be better educated. So you have always these long chains that contribute, that feed into the entire process. Meaning, as an entrepreneur, you combine these things. As worker, you generate the value with these things. With the commodities. And this is this leap, if you want, between using land, labor, and capital, and land as habitat, and labor as human life, as commodities. So what is employment then? From there you can define employment. Try to understand what it is, because we are facing exactly now this problem of defining, redefining employment. We can take it simple and say it is the labor contract. And indeed this is the definition, that defining employment refers to the existence of a labor contract. If you don't have a labor contract, full-time or part-time, then you are not employed. You may be working, but you are not employed. This labor contract is binding for both sides. For the employer and for the employee. It includes especially payment, wages, as well benefits, holidays, additional benefits like childcare, for instance, possibly. I said the other day it may include even a space for your car. And it is defined or defining as well the working conditions to some extent. Working time. How many hours? When? This is part of the working contract. Only as legal documents, as legal agreement between two parties, it is considered to be establishing employment. Unemployment, consequently, is not having work, but it is not being in employment. Meaning not having a contract of this kind, in this way being out of employed work, but major conditions being looking for employment, you want to have employment, not saying, I'm not employed, it's great, it's just everyday holidays. Fine. You are looking actively for employment, and you are available to take up employment. It's not about, I really want to work, but actually I never have time to work. It's not just not having time, but as well being ready to work in terms of qualification, in terms of the conditions, including the conditions of working age, different from legislation to legislation. There's a certain minimum age, and there's a certain age threshold when it comes to old age, whatever old age is. And I say it this way, whatever old age is, it is not subjectively defined. It is not, but I like to go on. In some cases you can do it. In some cases you can find a kind of compromise. Different legislations in place that sometimes you are allowed to work certain hours, sometimes you can go to early retirement already, but you still have to work a little bit. It's as well about money. From where do you get money? From your employer or from the old age pension funds? And in some cases it's very strict. There's currently a change going on more or less globally, at least in the so-called developed countries. Well, it's not right now, it's happening all the time. It was first going down, earlier retirement. It was not early retirement. Early retirement is if you still would have to work, could work, but you say, I want to retire now. Earlier means the retirement age, the official age is decrease is set earlier. Instead of the official age being 65, it is now 63. Now you have the opposite trend. Instead of being 63, it's 67 in many countries now, and it is still increasing. General rules, because you have then differences between, for instance, gender. Women are usually allowed earlier. You have different conditions possibly for certain professions. Pilots still being able to retire at an early age. It's not a question of money as such. It is as well a question of from where do you get the money. So if you are retiring very early, it's not that you should be, in normal case, you are not without money then, but you don't get the money anymore from the job, but from your old age pension funds. And this means, of course, that only employment is then considered as being valuable in terms of the economic process. Because in terms of the economic process, we are not interested in what you produce and reproduce in terms of use value, but we are interested in terms of what do you do, how do you contribute to the market. Meaning employment being part of the workforce, of the active workforce, and you are a part of the active workforce as well if you are unemployed, is the only thing that is relevant for the production of of exchange value, for the production that is measured in or by the figure of GDP. Anything else doesn't count. The core of employment is, in terms of the input, if you want, the labor contract. In terms of the output, the contribution to GDP. Which, of course, is a negative contribution if you are unemployed. Because you are part of the active workforce, but you are actually not contributing to the production, but you are taking something out. Namely, that money that is paid, or that you, part of which you paid before, earlier, by your taxation, as a matter of unemployment benefits. Breaks are paid or not, anyway we have them now and meet later.